Welcome back to A Fine Time for Healing, a place where your physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being are all that matter. So put your feet up, relax, and enjoy today's show. Today we have with us Joan Ranquet, who is an accomplished animal communicator. I know your ears are perking up because you're going to love this. Of over 30 years, she's an author. She's a TEDx speaker, educator, and animal garden. And Joan lives on her ranchette in the gorgeous hills of Southern California with her devoted animal family, 3 horses, 3 dogs, 4 cats. She donates her time to animal rescue missions, sanctuaries, and therapeutic riding centers, and is an avid fundraiser for organizations focused on the rescue, recovery, and rehabilitation of compromised animals and endangered species. What wonderful work you do. Welcome, Joan.
Thank you. Thank you. I love what you do too.
Thank you. Thank you. It's important to do something that you love, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So, tell us a little bit about your work, and then I'll start asking you questions.
Okay. So, first and foremost, I'm an animal communicator, but I always say that now I'm a school. So I don't do as many sessions as I used to do. Although every few Fridays, I tend to do a bunch. So an animal communicator will get on the phone or a Zoom with somebody or go to their home and get a sense of what's going on with the animal, emotionally, physically, behaviorally. And we do that through telepathic communication. So it's getting very quiet and picking up on the pictures, words, and feelings of the animal. And then from there, we share that information with the person, and then we can have a little more of a conversation. Or sometimes, I mean, you would know this better than anybody, sometimes when an animal just feels heard, there's so much healing happens just from being seen and heard.
Mm-hmm. Of course, of course. Is this something that anyone can learn to do?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I have a school. Excuse me. I teach. Sorry.
It's okay. You sound like me. I always have that.
I'm fighting off something, but it might win. Anyway,
I hope not.
I know, me too. It is something anybody can do. It's we all do it, right? Like in many ways, we were born doing this with our caregivers, our mother. This is how we communicated the minute we were born. And then through language, we lost that ability to communicate. And as time goes on, it becomes further and further away. And yet we hold this desire. I think we all have the secret desire to talk to animals, fly, and or swim without breathing underwater, right? So, a lot of us have those dreams. I happen to have all 3. But talking to animals was obviously the most important. So as we learn it later on, it's a lot like it's a lot like riding a bike. You've got the muscle memory. It's just going to be hard to get going again. So that's it.
Okay. And when you communicate with animals, how are you interpreting their thoughts and feelings?
I mean, I really just take it for face value.
I mean, do you hear them? Do you see the letters? Like, what are you hearing what they're saying?
Yeah, for example, yes, it is. So for example, before I started doing this, I had a young horse. He was an orphan colt, and he had wanted me to ride him, and I hadn't. I was waiting to get bigger and stronger. And one day I slipped onto his back.
We're okay. We'll get through this. Okay.
Yes. But I heard as sure as I was, as if somebody was in the woods with me, I've been waiting for this. So sometimes it comes in words, and sometimes it's really clear. Another example, um, I have several horses, and one morning I was down feeding, and I heard, "Help me." Now I looked at my horse, and she was perfectly fine, and you just looked at her, but to um, to I went around her body and to suddenly put my hands on places, I discovered that she had sliced herself pretty deeply, but you wouldn't have seen it. You know what I mean? And so if she hadn't said that, it might have taken me a couple days because the skin laid perfectly flat. And so yeah, sometimes we do hear it. Sometimes it comes in forms of pictures. Sometimes it comes in the form of feeling. I mean, we've all felt when we've walked into a room how an animal is feeling. If it's depressed, or obviously if it's excited, we know.
Right, right. Um, and I understand that horses are highly intelligent and they actually do communicate with each other and with people. Have you experienced that?
Absolutely. I mean, if we think about, I always say, if we look at the history of the world, we couldn't have done it without the horse. And they really partnered up with us beautifully, and cows and oxen and others. But the horse really was that partner. And then that partner could plow the field and also, look fancy and go into town on Sunday. So they've been, they've been our partners for a long time, but they communicate definitely in a herd. And just as a pack of wolves or coyotes would, or a pride of lions would. So that's that is their form of communication.
Okay. So animals, you say their mental distress can manifest in anxiety, fear, destructive behavior, depending on the severity of the condition. And it doesn't necessarily mean they're experiencing abuse. I guess we can all suffer these things. So, what are some of the things that you see cause these animals to experience these mental health issues?
So I mean, I think this is such an important topic because when you said that, it doesn't always mean that it comes from abuse. When you go, there are certain people who are very empathic and they're overwhelmed by animals in the shelter, and they'll be like, "Oh my God, they've all been abused," but it's just not true. They're grieving, right? They're grieving. And anybody who's left a circumstance, even if we think we've adopted this animal, we've made the most amazing home, and they came from some sort of like a hoarding situation. Well, the truth is, even in a hoarding situation, those people didn't start out wanting to hoard, right? So there was love there. There was a family. There was so when we take them away from that, even though we think we're great heroes and we, cleaned up the mats and their fur, they've still lost something in this transition.
Mm.
So a lot of animals experience grief in a way that we don't recognize or we don't acknowledge.
And when there's a companion pet in the house and that pet dies, you know, I know that that causes grief for the animal that's left behind, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it may manifest in certain ways. Like it could manifest in like, oh look, I'm getting all the attention now. But it doesn't mean that that animal isn't going in the other room and really deeply grieving. But they're survivors, right? So
Mhm.
how do you survive?
So, during COVID, a lot of people were home with their animals and then they had to go back to work. And I would imagine that could be a very stressful situation for the animals. And I've actually heard people say, that the animal isn't acting right since they've gone back to work. Is that like a separation anxiety?
I think it's a separation anxiety, and it's also could be very much on the part of the person, um, an element of guilt and anxiety from the person, and so that can compound the situation. I often think that when a human feels guilt, we are just like opening up the vault for bad behavior. And if so,
Mhm.
if the just be very solid and kind of what I call emotional leadership of I'm going back to work to give us a better life and gives the animals something to do, like leaves them with a Kong or, you know, cat toys or whatever it is. That it could be a perfectly great situation for the animal because animals shouldn't be on all the time anyway, you know?
Right.
So it is a separation anxiety, and I think somewhat on the part of the human as well.
When we talk to them, do they understand us?
They do in very simple terms. I mean, I don't, sit and go on and on about, you know, big complex situations.
Right.
Although I've been known to, what I usually say is, this is stupid people stuff. Just ignore it. Ignore it. But very much, I have oh, this is funny. So I have a little movement I do with my horses when I want them to get out of the way. And it's very much like I'm putting my two fingers up in the air, or if I've got my arms full of feed, it's one finger, right? And that's what a horse's, the lead mare's ears would do, kind of like go that way. So I do that, and I point and I say, go over there. And they almost always do. And so I take people on wildlife trips, and there's a place where we go in Kenya called it's called Savo East, but it's with the Sheldrick Trust. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but they take orphan elephants and get them back into the wild, and it's usually a 10-year process. So the teenage elephants are all in a herd in this place called Atumba Camp. So they come in at night, but during the day they're out as a herd, and if they choose to become herd members with one of the wild herds, that's kind of the goal. So anyway, this one, I was taking a video, and this one elephant came at me, and I had seen the men that run the camp do this. So I did that thing. I had my camera filming, and I did the fingers that direction. I was like, go over there, go over there. And that elephant like came right up to the camera and then went over there. And my
Wow.
I know I put it up on, and my friends just couldn't
Oh, there's your
believe
doggy.
one of them. Yeah, that's
Um,
vanilla.
so my husband and I are going out to California next week to cat sit my son's cat, who
Oh,
is very aloof, and it's been very difficult for us to get to eat for her to even allow us to pet her. Last time we were there, it took about 4 or 5 days before she would let us touch her. How do I communicate with her that it's safe and she doesn't have to be afraid?
well, one of the things that happened is you can imagine like, oh, you're so beautiful. I would love to touch you. And what we're doing is we're accidentally projecting a need onto them, right? There's a little bit of an uh, not a need. It's we're just projecting energy onto them that
That we want
often,
this.
yeah, yeah. And when we back up, and almost like if you could be aware of your energy, just like I'm gonna keep it in. I'm the safest person alive, and I just want to be with this cat in this very contained way. I have a feeling you'll have a different experience.
Okay. So it's my mindset that will bring
Mhm.
her, make her more comfortable.
And and your energy, bring your energy back,
Bring my
because
energy in.
yeah, when you think of what you said earlier, that horses communicate with each other, and all animals do, but think of a herd and think of like they can go into fight or flight, in a minute because they felt something within the group. So they're always in tune with each other.
Mhm.
And then when they're content and in the rest and digest parasympathetic nervous system, they're calm and eating and they can chill and some of them can sleep, but they're always feeling into that field of energy. And so are our animals. And often the cats that don't want to be petted are just super sensitive.
Okay. And so her parents are going to be going away, and they just got back from a trip. They travel a lot. So she's going to have some separation anxiety. She's going to also, we're going to be new. She's, skittish. And is there anything I can say to her?
We are the safest people on the planet and we are fun.
Okay, that's what I'm going to say.
And I always encourage my house sitters. I travel a lot too, and I have a lot of animals. So I always tell my animals, you know what? It's going to be more fun with the house sitter because there aren't as many rules.
Okay. And we are fun. Well, I don't think she has a lot of, I think she's spoiled, but it's okay. Okay. I was watching the news the other day. This is, there's always something to blow your mind, but um, there was someone who had um, an alligator as a companion pet. And I'm thinking, I don't know if you can really, and people were petting this alligator. It's weird. But can we communicate with reptiles the same way that we communicate with
Yeah,
mammals? We
absolutely.
can.
Yeah. I mean, think about turtles and yeah, I had turtles for a while.
Well, I had lizards for a very long time, and I had them very like tamed, and they were almost spoiled. They just loved to be held and things like that. And I would talk to them like they were regular animals, and they had personalities, and I could see it. It's just that alligators seem so untame that it would be
You know
hard.
what?
Yeah.
We have such a vision of sharks and alligators and crocodiles and that we can't see a personality,
Mm.
but if we dropped that and really saw who the individual is, you know, who's to say somebody isn't really smart and funny and quirky and just happens to be in an alligator body this time.
Yeah, I mean, I live in South Florida and we have a lake behind our house and there's alligators that swim by from time to time. I'm not afraid of them. They're just doing their thing. They're just traveling to the next place. Um, so you also do energy healing, right?
Mhm. I do two kinds. And so like I said, I'm a school now, so I teach animal communication for beginners or people that want to get certified. We have programs, and the same with the energy healing. So we have scalar wave, which is works on a cellular level, and it's very calming, really brings the nervous system down, and can be targeted for things like kidney disease and specific things. Um, then the other one I do is EFT, emotional freedom technique, and I lived in South Florida, and I had learned EFT when I lived in Denver, but it was in South Florida in Wellington where I tapped on a horse for the first time in 2004. And there's been no looking back. And I wrote a book about it called Emotional Freedom Technique for Animals and Their Humans.
So yeah, I saw that your telephone exchange was Palm Beach County, and I'm like, okay, I thought, and then I read you were in California, so okay, that explains that. Uh,
Yeah.
and you also have done a TED Talk called The Rainbow Bridge: Animals in Transition. Tell us about the Rainbow Bridge. Tell us it's such a beautiful concept. Um,
Yeah. It is a beautiful concept. I actually, since my bio, I've lost a cat and gained a horse. So it's right now it's still very, I just hit the 6 month mark and I'm really feeling her.
Mm.
Um, so, the Rainbow Bridge is this concept that there's a field right before heaven where our animals go and they wait for us until we die. And it is a beautiful concept. And so in that TEDx talk, I really addressed grief and our grief with our animals and how it's so important to recognize how much they impact our lives.
I've doing this show, I've had mediums on, and I've also experienced readings from mediums. So communication with the other side, in other words, and often the animals do come through. And I
Mm-hmm.
know I had a reading where two of my animals that had passed came through. Really surprised me. So they're not really sitting there on a field waiting for us. They really are. Or do you believe that our loved ones have embraced them and brought them in, and that they're living, that they're experiencing life in with that kind of support, or that kind of life, I should say?
I mean, I feel like it's wow. I'm really sorry. I'm never.
It's okay. I can so relate. Okay, so don't worry about it.
So I really believe, on the one hand, that yeah, of course, they're embraced by other loved ones, and they're right here, right? Like they're not in physical form anymore. But I joke that during COVID, I had dinner with my dead parents every night. So,
Yeah. Listen, when you tell me that, it's like second nature to me. I get that. I totally get that.
yeah,
Does it usually, do you think it takes a while from the time they pass till they communicate? Because I think they have to learn how to communicate or how to lower their energy to be able to match with ours, right?
yeah. I mean, sometimes my dad, when he passed, I was with him, and I could feel him so free. In like the minute he left, I was so sad, but I felt this freedom, which kind of got me through a period of time to do what I needed to do
Mhm.
to organize everything. But then, of course, it all sank in. But I, whereas others, yeah, it takes a while. Definitely took a long time with my mom, with one of my horses. Um, with my ex-husband just died, and recently I've felt some, I've experienced him.
Mhm. Yeah. How do animals feel about euthanasia? Because it's for us, it's probably the hardest thing we can ever do.
Well, I mean, that is such an interesting conversation, because I had a vet friend probably in the year 2000. I was living in Denver, and a veterinarian friend of mine was, had adopted Buddhism as her life path, and she would not euthanize anybody because she followed the Buddhist teachings, which says that, there are stages to death in the same way that there are stages, in the labor of birth.
Mhm.
And so um, I feel like animals often will want the help at the end because, but I've really watched those stages very closely, since then, and I teach about them on not on from a Buddhist perspective, but just that, we have to be there with and for their labor into that next life, whatever that looks like. And even, when I have people that are very Christian and I say into that next life, I can say, into heaven or whatever it looks like. So it's important, I feel like, to allow those stages, because as we know with humans, sometimes there are places where they get to where the pain goes away because they're in this other altered
Mhm.
state almost. where they're kind of conscious and they can do some things. And because we're really helping them with their unfinished business, and we don't know what that is, right? That's theirs. And so I feel like, um, but animals will often say, yes, I could use the help, because when we drop everything because they're dying, all of a sudden we're in this love bubble that nobody wants to leave. And so, I mean, I know with my cat that last week that she was alive, I canceled everything and just spent that time with her.
Mhm.
And it was incredible. And neither one of us wanted her to leave because we were in such a state of love. But at the same time, the minute that she got that injection, she was gone. And I mean, it was as if she was hanging on by a piece of floss, you know.
Okay. So it's humane to do it if you,
Yeah,
as long as you're there with them.
I think so.
Yeah, too bad we can't make those choices for ourselves.
I know.
Um, so I've been a vegetarian for a very, very long time. And for me, see, I got the same problem. For me, when I see an animal, I see the soul. I don't see that I have uh, I'm sovereign over that, or that I have power over that, or that I'm better, or that I have a more important place on earth than the animals do. And so it breaks my heart to think about an animal being here and being slaughtered for people to eat.
It kills me.
Tell me what your feeling is.
It, I've been vegan. I've been vegetarian on and off for probably 30 years, and certainly the last 12 years on as a vegetarian. And then, no, 15 years. And then as a vegan, it's been 6 years, 7 years. I was for 6 years, and I flew it for about a year, but now I'm back very to it. So, like you, I agree that I see a soul, and it's that soul is not here for me to eat. Um, and I also believe that even the dairy industry, to me, is a feminist issue, because we're keeping them pregnant for our consumption, and so I think it's a very, it's that's how.
Right. How do the animals feel?
Terrified, terrified. I mean, and you can see them cry.
Oh my gosh. You know, I've asked this question before, and one communicator told me, well, they know that their purpose here on Earth is for this, and they accept that purpose. But to me, no, you don't agree. I don't agree either.
Oh, you know what? I think that is our way of justifying it, and we have a million ways that we justify things. And so I've heard that too. In the very beginning, when I first started doing animal communication, a couple animal communicators, same thing to me, and I was like, that there is just no way that's possible. I don't, no. I mean, how would you feel if you found out that it turns out, even though you have this podcast and you've done all this healing, you're really here for somebody's food?
Horrible.
Right.
It's
It's insane.
yeah, it is insane. It is insane.
But there's lots of ways that through history, because of religious beliefs or science, we have made it that we don't believe we can communicate with them. We don't believe that they feel this deeply because we've had to sacrifice them or use them for experiments. And that's, as humans, that's what has happened. And so that's just another perfect construct that man has made of like, oh, it's their contract. They're here for us.
Mm,
Nobody's here for us. Nobody.
I agree. I agree. I don't see us being any better than animals. Absolutely not. But if you think back to the caveman days, that was their natural way of eating. They had to kill animals to eat. So some people say, well, we are natural carnivores. You don't have to be. It takes a real effort to not be, but
It took a real effort to be a carnivore back then, you know? They ate a lot of berries, they ate a lot of whatever was there.
mhm.
They created it wasn't exactly easy to be a carnivore. It took days, but now it does take a lot of effort to be a vegetarian or even a
Vegan,
vegan.
right? Yeah, I mean, it's much easier. I've been doing this for 41 years. And when I first started, there was one
Yeah.
store, one store I could go to, and now, I mean, you can get everything: vegetarian, vegan, gluten-free, keto. I mean, you can get whatever you want to get right now, so it's a lot easier to do it. So how would we begin to communicate with our animals? I mean, I think people bond very deeply with their pets, and it's like a child, it's a family member. Um, how can they be in tune with the animal and help it with if it's having emotional issues or physical issues? How can we do that?
I feel like one of the best ways to do it is just to um, get quiet and feel into what they might be feeling. Like, again, like we're saying, nobody's here for us. So it's like, take your agenda out of the way and feel into what is my friend here feeling? My friend here is feeling like a cat could walk by any minute and we could chase her or him. But
Really?
yeah,
Is
she
that what
is
she's thinking?
yeah, she is waiting
She
for the cat.
she looks pretty chill.
She is pretty chill, but those ears, well, now she's gonna be like,
Yeah, but
I think
she'd like to chase a cat, right?
a girl can dream. But anyway, one I always say that people come to classes because they want to learn how to receive information. But if we just started with being conscientious of what we're sending, we're going to change our household because we often are sending things that we don't even realize. Like there's a, a story that all animal communicators tell, or an example, and that is if I wanted the dog to get off the couch, which first of all doesn't happen here, but and I would say, okay, off. And then if I thought in my mind, the minute I walk into the other room, she's going to get back up on the couch. What do you think is going to happen? She's going to get back up on the couch because she sees the picture. So they, like we talked about with the herd of horses, they're always tracking us and they're looking at our pictures, words, and feelings. So when we are in that state of stress and we're stressing about something, we're sending them pictures that we don't even recognize that we're sending them. So if we become conscious and quiet our minds just in general, we're going to automatically start sending, kind of more of a safety vibe. And then as we get better at that, then we can be very specific about what it is that we want. Like, I need you to use the litter box, or I need you to be quiet when the neighbor drives by. All of those things that, those behaviors that we want, if we start really consciously picturing them and we move a lot of the clutter out of the way, we generally, unless they're super, you know, generally we have compliance or partnership on these things that we
Interesting. Well, dogs, dogs are they're pack-minded and they like a leader, right? Is that true?
Hmm.
Okay,
Absolutely.
right. So, do we how do you feel about discipline? And how do we discipline?
I mean, I will on occasion put a dog in a timeout, but often that timeout is more for them, right? Like if they're too amped or they're going to be nervous with another dog or something in the house, I'll just put them in a timeout so it's not a discipline. So I guess I don't, discipline is in the moment. It's like, nope, leave it, that sort of thing. But I don't, there's no after effect. There's no, you're gonna have a timeout for this. All right, I'll tell you one thing. I did years ago. I had a cat that would knock food off the counter, and the lab would eat it. This was my old dog, right? They had a pact going.
They're in cahoots, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Or they'd pull the garbage out. I mean, they were such a tag team. And I would be like, okay, that's it. I mean, it was like a comedy. I would say, that's it, time out. And I'd put them in the guest bathroom, and the dog would like be like, oh yeah, it was so worth it. And the cat would walk in purring. So I learned like they don't care. Is not this is not bad for them. This is I got the garbage and now I have to go sit in the bathroom. So if in rather it's up to me to handle the garbage, right?
Okay.
Because their world not that's our biggest challenge is we don't understand their world, right? We don't seem to understand that like barking at the window is fun, right? It drives us insane, but for them it's great. It's the best thing in the world. So
They think it's
we
fun.
have to learn to adjust some of our expectations and set them up for success rather than discipline, if that
Right.
makes sense.
And if you're going to have an animal, I think that you need to understand what your responsibilities are going to be. Because very often people just get animals and then, they don't like the way they behave. They don't like the barking. They don't like the cats scratching the claws, the this, the that. And I'm like, why'd you get it? Why'd you get that animal if you don't like that? What what are dogs saying when they bark?
Well, I mean, my dogs have about 60 different barks. And so the other day, I have a horse that she's 36, and sometimes she gets stuck, right? She can't get up. And at 3 in the morning last Saturday night, this one made one bark, and I woke up. I knew what the bark meant, and I ran down and I got my horse up and I went back to bed.
Aw.
So it's amazing what so they often it will be an alert. Often it will be sometimes it's territorial, like there's somebody in the yard. But very often it's an alert. Hey, there's a guy walking down the street, and
Right.
that's so exciting because for a long time there was nothing. Now there's a guy walking down the street.
I have a friend who says, that the dog next door starts barking at like 5 o'clock every evening and barks for hours, and she's like, it's so annoying. So I guess maybe they're not giving that dog attention or, you know.
Yeah, I think yeah. I mean, I have a neighbor over there also that barks very early in the morning, and they've got a lot of dogs. So I think it's also just, hey, hey, it's my turn.
Can you ask a dog not to bark?
What I did was I learned to acknowledge each type of bark. Like another thing that my other dog will do, I know the minute that one bark is a coyote, right?
Oh, I love.
So I acknowledge I've learned every tone of barking. And in my book, Emotional Freedom Technique for Animals, I tell a story where I actually was writing my second book, Energy Healing for Animals. And I was so sick of writing and I was looking for a distraction anyway. It was a rainy day. I was living in Seattle and a rainy day and after another rainy day after another rainy day. So we were all bored. And so I decided I would spend the day barking with them because they were driving me nuts. And I sat at the window and barked with them and they thought I was insane, but it was so much fun, right? And so what I recognized was, oh, this is this bark, this is this bark, this is this bark. And I start listening for what the bark is. So when it starts, I say, thank you. I see the man on the horse, or thank you. I see the guy with four dogs.
Oh,
And when I say thank you, they're like, okay.
I don't have to bark
So
anymore.
exactly. She got it. She's not so dense after all.
So your cat passed, and you've communicated with her, right?
Mhm.
What has she told you?
I mean, mostly I just had an animal communication class talk to her, and it was so beautiful. And she just let it, so she was a real healer. Like people will bring their animals that they're fostering that they kind of can't get through to, and they maybe stayed in the guest room, and she always slept like right next to that crate and would just purr and send in healing. So she's just let us know that she's still here, she's healing, and that she's still really uh yeah, that she really is still doing her job just from the other side and that she
Really?
can do it bigger.
I have trouble going into, actually, I don't go into pet stores where there's dogs and cats and rescue places and things like that because my heart breaks. And that's probably not a good thing because it's not probably helping them if I do walk in and my heart is breaking. But how do we approach that?
Well, that's something I work really hard on with my students because it is if we project onto animals, poor baby or you poor thing, we're not helping them, right? And so if you can't for this minute go in there, then it's probably best you don't for now. But I think EFT is a really great way. And then what I always say to people is that our mission is bigger than our feelings.
Mm.
So if we go into mission, which is I'm here to help animals,
Okay.
then I don't get sidetracked by my feelings. I can feel it later, but I want to go in and see them as all able to get homes. And we do a lot of work with animals in rescues and shelters. In fact, we have a whole curriculum for shelters that I just did a pilot project in Michigan at a shelter where we tapped on all the unadoptable animals. We did communication and then tapping for several days, and most of those dogs have been adopted, and they were impossible. I mean, one
Really?
was, yeah. So the first step is just recognizing that what I want to do is to help, and I want to help. That's more important than my feelings about the situation.
That makes sense. And basically that's kind of the thread of everything that you've said. Your responses to all my questions is take yourself out of it and be there for that animal without your
Yeah,
needs, right?
right.
Um, in this information that I got from your publicist, it said research by Guide Dogs UK reveals that nearly 75% of dogs showed signs of poor mental health in 2022. That's really, that's awful. Why is that?
I mean, I think that I mean, I have a lot of clients that are guide dogs, and they're very very happy to do their job. But, you know, it's so in the animal kingdom, again, if we take that herd of horses that we were talking about, they operate on what's called pressure and release. So they're eating and everything's great and they're happy. And then maybe there's a cougar or some sort of a predator or humans in a Jeep. And so, um, so somebody will alert that there's something and they're, you know, the you know, the big response of like, we've got to move. So that becomes like a pressure, and running to freedom or to escape that becomes the release, right? And we see it in terms of like as that animal runs, the adrenaline is released in order for them to get moving, and then as they run, that adrenaline dissipates. They get to the next location where they're all safe. They settle. They look around. We can be in this rest state and content and eat. We don't have a lot set up for animals for that release. So things become pressure, 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 pressure with no release. The release would be exercise, fun, playful activities. And again, exercise. And not just opening the door and letting the dog out, but really getting that dog the opportunity to release the stress. Okay. And when, you know, and that's one of the reasons that my dogs are very chill is, I mean, given the opportunity, she can be amped up like you've never seen. I mean, she's on it. But we just, you know, this morning as I go about to feed, you know, they get a lot of play, a lot of running, a lot of playtime. And then we come in. I built my day around each of the species here so that they have time to really play. 3 mornings a week, we're out on a huge hike. And then on Sunday, we go on a long walk. And then the other 3 days is very playful. And those are the days I kind of spend time with my horses. So everybody gets their opportunity for release here. And that's not built into most people's thinking. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking back to a horse whisperer that I had on my show a while back, and she was saying how a racehorse that was supposed to win that didn't win was very upset because it had high expectations for itself because that was put on them. How do you feel about that?
I mean, I always say that you know, no animal regrets not going to the Olympics, right? So I don't think they have regret, but I do feel like they can have expectation, and when you add in an animal, I mean, just like people, there are animals with high expectations, right? Like one of my dogs here will just, we've got to stick to the rules, and the other ones are like, forget the rules, right?
Right.
So that one, you know, she has high standards. So if you find an animal with high standards and people with high standards, yeah, it's going to be a lot of pressure.
And horses like to be rode?
You know, I struggle with that. Even though I do ride, I struggle with it. So I have a horse. She's 36 years old. She hated it from day one. Many of the arguments, and probably my divorce, was over the fact that I kept her, even though she didn't want to be ridden. And I have my other horse that did like it. And so I think it's individual. And I feel like what they like is the partnership. And riding isn't always what ends up happening at all. I mean, I have 4 horses now, and I have so much fun with my herd. And it's not about riding, although 1 or 2 of them do like it. And so I do that with them, but it's not I mean, I try to make it happen Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but it doesn't always happen Friday.
Mm.
I mean, they enjoy the time with me. We have a lot of fun. So it isn't always about being ridden, but I don't know that she hated it, and I honored that.
How did you know? Just, I mean, was it communication, or you could tell by her body language?
Well, when she tries to throw us both off a cliff, she just was never comfortable with. She loved the idea of it, but and that was through communication. All right, so I'll tell you. One time in 2000, I was living in Denver, and I was so frustrated because I didn't know what to do next, right? And I was walking back into the barn, and I heard as clear as day, "It's so hard for me to take direction from you because I've been your mother in so many lifetimes." And I went,
What?
"Oh,
Oh.
everything. That changed everything." I then never put anything on her that was it was just it changed everything. So we get the most ridiculous, wonderful relationship. And she's got really only one of her four legs seems to really work well, but she's my world.
Okay, so that opens up a whole nother conversation here because so you're saying that we don't always incarnate as human beings. I I believe we incarnate on other planets and other things, but I never really thought about incarnating as an animal.
I can't even tell you how many lifetimes I've had as a horse or
Really? You've been a
yeah,
horse?
and a dog and a lion and a dolphin. I took people to I the last trip I did was to go visit tigers in India. And it was tigers, temples, and the Taj Mahal. That was a trip. So we did a lot of temples, Buddhist temples, Hindu temples. And the Buddhists believe that we incarnate I think like 1.2 million times before we ascend. And so imagine, wouldn't it be easy to come back repeatedly as a fly? You could have had a lot of lifetimes.
That's right. They very short. You come, you go, right? Somebody
Right?
swats you, you're
2
done.
days.
Right.
Yeah.
That's funny. It would. It absolutely would. Um, what about birds?
I'm communicating with them or being a bird.
Well, yeah, communicating with them. Are they okay in cages? Because that doesn't seem like, what they'd be happy with.
Um, I so I would love an African gray, but I struggle with that whole situation, right? Um, I don't. I mean, I think that again, when we start looking at what they get out of being part of a family, then that starts to change things. It's sort of like the dog in the hoarding situation. Like if they're loved, have love, and they have a family, that starts to change that conversation. And um, I so yeah, I mean, I've almost everybody I've communicated with is, maybe wanted a bigger space or whatever. But I also I I will focus with the animal on, like, there's nothing I can do about that, right? I can't say let your bird free, but I can help with all of the other things that the bird may be um communicating about. And usually it's the relationship. It's because I don't love zoos, and yet I've been called to communicate with animals in zoos. And I'll never forget. I was at a zoo, and I always have to sign a thing that I can't speak about where. And I was so surprised at how much love I felt among the orangutans. And the zookeeper said, I said, uh, after we had the communication, I said, I'm so surprised that I feel how I feel about this, because I would have thought I would have felt like they're confined. And the zookeeper said to me, no zookeeper goes into this because we love zoos. We go into this because we love animals.
Mm.
And I went, oh, yeah. So it changed then how I walk into even wildlife conservation centers, and I had a class years ago. We do a lot with wildlife centers now, but when I lived in the Seattle area, we would go to a place called Sarve Wildlife Center and visit these two eagles, and both had been injured and could never be out in the wild. And one of them had had a book written about her, and her name is Freedom. And the other one was Ashkata. I can't say her name. It was a Native American name. So the the I remember a couple people standing there just like, these birds should be free. And I said, these birds will never be free. I mean, they would die if they were in the wild. They one has a broken wing, and the other one had another type of I mean, I think they're broken wings. But the one enjoyed, truly enjoyed going out to schools and being part of programs and being admired. She was a little bit of a diva.
Okay.
The other one loved, like, the minute that the people were coming around to feed, she jumped on her stuffed animals. She jumped around. She was just, everything was so fun for her. So it's like, why would we take that away from them?
Mm-hmm. So I guess you can tell by their behavior if they're happy, you know.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
I had a very angry cockatiel years ago, and I made a mistake. I was young. I got it, and I got Pier One used to sell these stick houses, and it would start wide, then it would go all the way up. And I thought, oh, I always wanted to have one and put a bird in it. Well, that was the worst thing I could do because the bird, as a little bird, it learned that it could go up there and hide, and it never wanted to come down. So when I put it in a bigger cage, all it did was hiss and bite, you know. Uh, but somebody actually
Yeah,
took, huh?
you hadn't done all the work with the hand and the whole, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of had its own thing. I mean, I would let it fly around and stuff like that, but it just was not tame. But I did have a bird person who took it off my hands, who said that's no problem. They knew how to handle it. Um, but yeah, I mean, animals are fascinating. It's so good to
Yeah,
talk to you about this. I mean, this is such a great education, a great perspective on all of this. Very different. I think people will
thank,
really enjoy hearing what you have to say.
thank you. It's been
Yeah,
really fun.
yeah, it is fun. It is fun. Okay, so you have how many books now?
I have three. My first one with Hay House is called Communication with All Life, and my second one is What Sounds True, and it's called Energy Healing for Animals. And then my new one is Emotional Freedom Technique for Animals and Their Humans.
And they're
And it's,
humans. Okay.
yes, with Finch Press. And so yeah, I'm really grateful that I've gotten books published.
Hmm. Yeah, that's wonderful. And for for people who would like to, so you don't really do this work anymore, you just teach others.
I do about once a month, and it gets booked out. But yeah, I still do. But basically, I'm a school,
Okay.
communication with all university. So,
Okay.
um,
And people
and
can
it,
take your courses.
yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I have everything from, a beginner course to professional animal communicators.
Okay. And how do we get in touch with you?
My website is JoanRanquet.com.
Okay, joanranquet.com. Okay. Um, okay. Well, I hope this resonates with somebody that decides they want to learn more about communicating with their pet, whatever that may be. And I've really enjoyed talking to you. This is fun.
Yeah, thank you.
This is fun. All right, Joan. Well, thank you. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Take care. And bye. What is your doggy's name?
This one is Penelope.
Bye, Penelope. Penelope is in heaven. She is so calm and relaxed. Bye, Penelope. All right.
Hmm.
Take care. All righty. Bye bye.
Bye.